Okay, so are you ready to dive back into this wild 2024 election? Because things just got a whole lot more interesting. We're just a few weeks away from Election Day, and the race is neck and neck.
You know it.
Thankfully, we've got some fresh insight to dig into. Today, we're talking about Steve Kornacki, NBC's election night guru, breaking down their newest poll on the race.
Yeah, and this isn't just any poll, right? It was conducted right after that Trump-Harris debate, so it's capturing people's immediate reactions, you know?
Exactly. So what's the big shocker? Well, NBC's poll has Trump and Harris in a dead heat.
A dead heat. Can you believe it?
Remember, just a month ago, Harris was up by 5 points.
It was a comfortable lead.
This new data has really flipped the script.
Yeah, a lot of people are scratching their heads trying to figure out what's behind this shift.
Yeah.
But two things really jump out from the poll.
Okay, all ears.
So first, Harris's likability ratings, they've taken a hit. She's not viewed as favorably as she was a month ago, and this is key. She's no longer seen as more likable than Trump.
That's a big deal. So are you saying voters are suddenly head over heels for Trump again?
Not necessarily love, but there's this undeniable warming effect when people look back at his presidency. And get this, his retrospective approval rating, meaning how people view his presidency now, is higher than when he was actually in office.
Wait, are you serious? That's kind of wild.
It's true. And to make it even crazier, Trump's retrospective approval is actually higher than Biden's current approval rating.
Okay, now that's just blowing my mind. So we're seeing this weird dynamic where Trump's past presidency is somehow looking better than Biden's current one, at least in the eyes of some voters.
It definitely seems that way. And you know what? It gets even more intriguing when you look at how people feel about their policies. Like the poll asked people to think back to Trump's policies and how they felt those policies impacted their families.
So they're basically asking people to compare the impacts of Trump's past policies to how they feel about Biden's current policies.
Interesting. Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. 44% of those polled said that Trump's policies actually helped their families.
Hold on, wait a minute. A plurality said Trump's policies were better for their families than Biden's are right now. That's a serious curveball.
It is a big deal. It suggests that even though Trump is out of office, the perceived impact of his policies, at least for a significant chunk of voters, might be more positive than Biden's current policies.
Wow. So while Harris's campaign might be hoping to ride those coattails of the current administration, this Trump nostalgia, this positive feeling about his presidency might be a bigger factor than anyone expected.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got this tightening race fueled by a dip in Harris's likability and this unexpected wave of what you called Trump nostalgia.
Yeah.
But is there anything in this poll that offers even a glimmer of hope for Harris?
You know, there is one potential bright spot for her, and it's the power of single-issue voters, specifically those laser-focused on abortion.
Oh, yeah, I remember Kornacki highlighting that. What did the poll say about this group?
So the poll asked voters a really pointed question. Is there one issue that's the deciding factor for your vote?
So not just an important issue, but like the be-all and end-all.
Yep. And guess what issue came out on top? Abortion. Over 22% said it's their make-or-break issue in this election.
Wait, so single-issue voters on abortion are a significant number. That's huge for Harris.
It is. And the poll shows Harris with a commanding 19-point lead over Trump on this issue. So if this group of single-issue voters turns out in force, they could really swing things in key states.
So we've got the Trump nostalgia effect, and then this potential surge in single-issue abortion voters. Is there anything else that makes this election even more unpredictable?
Oh, you're in for a treat. This election might have the largest gender gap ever recorded in a presidential election.
We're kidding, right?
Yeah.
Didn't we already have a massive gender gap in the last election?
We did, but this one could be even bigger. Kornacki points out that Trump has a 16-point lead among men, while Harris has a 14-point lead among women.
Do the math for me, because I'm not sure I can.
That's a potential 30-point difference.
Wow. That's like two separate elections happening at the same time, right? One where men are voting for Trump, and another where women are voting for Harris.
You've got it. And that makes predicting the outcome even more complex because it's not just about national numbers, but how these demographic trends play out in individual states.
Okay, so we've got these huge shifts happening right under our noses. But is there any chance voters will revert to their traditional party affiliations? Remember that whole coming home idea?
It's a real factor, and it's worth considering in this election. Kornacki even mentioned it. And it's something to keep in mind as we get closer to Election Day. You know, a lot of people might be flirting with different candidates, but ultimately end up voting for the same party they've always voted for.
That's a real possibility, especially in a close race.
Yeah.
But if coming home does happen, Wouldn't that give Harris an edge, since Democrats usually have higher turnout?
You'd think so, but there's a wild card here. Voter turnout in 2020 was massive, with around 160 million people voting.
I remember that. It was historic. Everyone is fired up about that election.
Exactly. But this year, the enthusiasm doesn't seem to be as high. Our poll reflects that sentiment. Now, if turnout drops significantly, say closer to 130 million, which is more typical of recent elections, it becomes a whole new ballgame.
Because then every single vote becomes even more crucial.
Exactly. And it could give an unexpected advantage to whichever side can better motivate its base to get out and vote.
Wow, this is a lot to take in. So many factors at play, and it feels like the race could go either way. Okay, so we've got Trump nostalgia, a potential surge in single-issue abortion voters, a possible record-breaking gender gap, and the uncertainty of voter turnout. You're right, this election is anyone's game. So what's the big takeaway here? What do we need to be watching as we get closer to Election Day?
Well, here's something to think about. With lower voter turnout, a real possibility which groups are going to be the most motivated to vote. Will it be the ones fired up about a potential Trump comeback? Or will it be those worried about things like abortion and what a Harris administration would mean for the country? How those groups actually show up at the polls? That could decide the whole thing.
You're not kidding. It's really coming down to the wire.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? This whole Trump nostalgia thing, it actually reminds me of something I read about the 1980 election.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Well, you remember there was this whole Reagan Revolution thing, right?
Yeah.
Some historians say people back then were looking back at the 70s like it was this time of chaos. The economy was a mess. There was social unrest. People wanted stability, a return to like traditional values. They saw that in Reagan.
Interesting. So you're saying there's a historical parallel here. People looking back on a past administration with rose-colored glasses, like they're longing for something they think they lost.
Exactly. It's wild how much this repeats. In American politics, you see it again and again.
It just goes to show you history always repeats itself. Always good to look back to understand what's happening now.
Couldn't agree more. And it brings us right back to this election. All these uncertainties, all these unexpected twists and turns, it really does feel like anything could happen.
It really does. But even with all the unknowns, the fact that we're having this conversation, right? Breaking down the data, hearing different perspectives, that's huge.
What do you mean?
It shows that people are engaged, they're asking the tough questions, trying to understand the world. That's what democracy is all about.
You're right. That's something we all need to keep doing no matter who wins this thing.
Exactly. So what are your big takeaways after this whole discussion? What questions are still swirling around in your head?
Well, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how all these pieces fit together. Will this Trump nostalgia be stronger than those concerns about abortion, the gender gap? And will voter turnout be higher or lower than in 2020?
And maybe the million-dollar question, how will all of this play out in the battleground states?
That's exactly it. It's not just about the national picture anymore. It all comes down to those key states.
You got it. Those swing states are going to be the center of attention.
All right, everyone, stay tuned because we're going to be keeping a close eye on those battleground states. We'll break it all down for you as the results come in.
We'll be here every step of the way to help you make sense of this wild 2024 election.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. And until next time, keep those questions coming.